You're listening to Till the Bottom. For better or for worse, everything is fascinating if you dig deep enough. If you agree with this, then this podcast might be right for you. Let's start talking.
Welcome to Till the Bottom. Here we are, your hosts, Mitra, Nacho, and our three times guest, Nakul. Now we fulfill our promise. We just had a little bit of a break.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
That's correct. We should learn from our mistakes. Yeah. We stopped last episode kind of getting into the weeds with Islam and why it might be more difficult to envisage a future in which Islam follows the path of, for instance, Christianity in the sense of going through a reformation, or whatever happened to Judaism, that we highlighted some of the similarities between how all-encompassing Judaism and Islam is, but now it turns out that most Jewish people, I would say 99.9% of modern Jewish...
That's putting it a bit too much.
And let's not say all-encompassing. All-encompassing is a very benevolent term. Let's say control freak.
I would still wager that about 30% of Jews are extremely orthodox.
I'm exaggerating. It's an exaggeration.
30% is probably a high number because most US Jews and most Jews in...
I'm exaggerating. There's such a thing as a Zionist movement, for instance, and there's a fraction of
and the Antwerp Jews, they are quite orthodox.
There are. It was just an exaggeration, just to get the point across. No, I completely... I will be the first to acknowledge that Orthodox Judaism, it still exists, and
they're just too few. Jews itself are too few. So Orthodox is even less.
So let's talk about this thing. So if Islam, according to you, is allowed to spread because this entire left liberal political movement where we are not supposed to respect every religion and not talk crap about anything, you see an nihilistic future where Islam is completely taken over the world? The current form of extremely fundamental Islam.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that, because I cannot make an informed point about that. But I would definitely say that what we mentioned earlier, that it could be that Jews became less fundamentalist because they interacted with others. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, what does this mean? This means that, if considered to be true, it means that they were exposed to competing ideas or different ideas, and that's why they probably let go of their baggage. Mm-hmm. Not if you use the same argument, then it doesn't necessarily mean that Muslims have to go to a different country. Rather, what it means is that Muslims have to be exposed to different views. Yeah. And this cannot happen when you have this extreme left liberal ecosystem, which basically says that, as that man from Poland said in that talk, which basically says that criticizing religion is against is hate speech. So that's the point, that you don't need to say that Islam has to spread to other countries to replicate what happened to the Jews. Rather, the spread has to be in the mind. Yeah? So you have to introduce ideas, and that is what brings changes.
But do you guys get where they are coming from when they are talking in that manner? When they say that no, he should not disrespect other cultures or something.
No, I don't get it. They come from a very supremacist point of view. Okay. They think that they are better and the other people are not as good as them. They are not as good to understand what they are trying to say. It is a very condescending attitude that, okay, don't disrespect the culture of that person, because he is not that intelligent, he is not like us. He cannot take a good joke, or he cannot take some criticism. He is an inbred fellow.
So it's just about the condensation.
Yeah, it is condensing. It is a condensing, self-righteous, condescending, self-righteous attitude, which is kind of racist.
Don't you think there's another route? The reason I get very uncomfortable when we are trying to make moral grounds, say, like, I can totally justify based on what I see that there is a lot of horrible stuff that is coming out because of radical Islam. And then in my country, everything seems to be modern and good and everything. And I have got the entire audience to think that, these guys are the root of all problems. So now, isn't it possible that there's a large chunk of population, if you guys go and attack this place and kill a lot of people, doesn't it give them moral and ethical justification that what they're doing is right?
Yeah. So you are saying that
I think that is where the fundamental root of political correctness comes from. Because, say, for instance, this drone attacks happening and you're killing a nonsensical amount of people without even having a personal... you're not physically going and killing, but you're killing a large population by statistics. And then a large chunk of population is justifying it in moral and ethical grounds that maybe that is right. Based on the fact that, horrible things are happening because Islam is at the root. So I personally think that political correctness is an extreme form of trying to go against that.
I think those are two different things. I think what you are referring to are, now that I have decided, let's say I'm a politically correct type. Now that I have decided that criticizing other culture, particularly Islam, is out of bounds, I need to justify this somehow. And then there are good justifications that you can make to kind of deviate the discourse towards an area in which you have more groundings where to stand when you want to defend the reactionary actions of Muslims. And then you go to issues like the things you're talking about, the fact that these countries have been in a constant state of war, and Western powers, for good or ill, have managed to be also a constant presence there, and sometimes they have catalyzed some of the...
No, but it doesn't have to be Western powers. I think it's just that but you can justify things very easily when you say one culture is superior than others. And we have seen that in history over every period of society.
Sure.
When the colonialism happened, Christian missionaries were imposing their culture on us, on the Indians. Similarly, Islam did the same thing in India.
Exactly.
They really imposed their culture. Hitler killed all the Jews. So these are the reasoning
for political correctness.
This is the reason why I am uncomfortable about talking about cultural supremacy.
Because now, the problem with this cultural supremacy, let's not use supremacy, but the root cause of political correctness, which you are articulating, is that you are afraid that the people who consider some aspects of a different culture to be bad, they might impose their culture on the other. Yeah. And so,
if you are doing horrible things, you get a justification for it.
I think what you're trying to say...
That's the fear that you have, which you think is the ground for political
and you already articulated in the previous episode that reform is not an option for Islam.
I did not say that. Are you crazy? Dude, come on. I had never said that.
Let me...
Are you trolling me?
Wait, let me try to reinterpret what you said, the argument you made, which is, you are afraid because history has shown that if you start going down the way of, however objectively saying, my culture, for instance, is better than your culture because of X, Y, and Z. At the beginning, at the root, you might have objective good arguments to make that case. But this tends to go out of control, and it has happened historically.
Go down the rabbit hole, and eventually
it has happened throughout.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So your concern is that we should learn from history and be very cautious when we are making these kind of pronouncements of comparing cultures in an objective manner. Yes,
why it might be dangerous to actually go in that. I think we all know.
His point is correct to that extent.
Yeah, we all know why that it's potentially dangerous, right? It can go very wrong. This is the kind of conversation that can spiral out of control, right? Yeah. Still, there has to be a way. There has to be a way to talk about these things and keep the effects contained. Right? There has
Not
to
just
be a
content,
way.
there has to be a way of articulating what you want to say correctly.
And getting an opportunity to articulate it.
Yeah. And basically, there has to be an open exchange of ideas. And if that happens, then such issues are very less likely to happen in the future. Now, with political correctness, the problem is that when you're politically correct, you are preventing actually a conversation from happening.
Definitely.
And that is completely
No, I agree totally with that.
counterproductive.
Yes.
Yeah, it is counterproductive. Political correctness comes when I said earlier, so there are two ways to be politically correct. One is the way which I mentioned earlier. When you are racist, you think the others are stupid, so they don't understand, so be politically correct so that you don't hurt them. The other is this, where you are afraid that, there might be a fallout eventually of a hardening of positions and an eventual clash. But with the second thing, you are actually ensuring that it happens by being politically correct.
Yes. Yes,
So-
and I am absolutely against political correctness.
Yeah. So there are these
Suppressing freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Like there has to be a channel where there is conversation.
and so
This
there are these
is really limiting that.
While acknowledging at the same time why you might feel some sort of trepidation when you
No,
approach
it clearly makes
So
me
it's like-
very uncomfortable to talk about this topic.
and that is why it takes balls to speak about things. Being politically correct is
women
taking
can
the
also
easy
talk
way
about
out.
this.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway,
That's why it takes guts to be politically correct,
Yes.
and it is the coward's decision to be so it takes guts not to be politically correct, and it is the coward's decision to be politically correct.
I wouldn't be as harsh as that because I think there are cases. I think you can make. I'm gonna be a little bit condescending about this now, but I think there are people that are politically correct and very cautious with their speech and the way they approach criticisms towards other cultures, and they genuinely think they are being nice. I'm being nice, and they don't necessarily go further than that. They don't necessarily say, I am being nice and you are being an asshole. I have that moral high ground and you are just an immoral kind of person. Not everyone, some do that other
Yeah,
step.
but you see, being nice doesn't mean you're not a coward. So when I said that everyone who is politically correct is a coward,
Depends
I still stand
because depends if there's a factor of fear. If they are being dishonest, if they are being politically correct just for show, but inside they are thinking, actually, I honestly think cultures are different. I'm just gonna say this because this is what passes as correct. Then that's being a coward. But if they truly believe,
then they are not being politically correct. If they truly believe, then they are stating their actual opinion. They are not being politically correct.
okay, perhaps that's correct. So it's just that their opinion happens to be very much aligned with, so as to make
They are
it almost
misinformed.
indistinguishable.
They are misinformed.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Political correctness is patently dishonest, cowardly. 100%.
But if we're going to define it like that, so when somebody is being politically correct, is somebody that is basically being dishonest. Somebody that
Yeah. I would say
knows
dishonest. But sometimes not even knowing it. Yeah.
But not knowing it, then you are not being politically correct. Then you are just saying what you think is the truth. Now, and it is political correctness is a very safe way of hiding actual crimes that you are doing.
crime.
Yeah. So now, for example, take Obama, the bombings in Libya and Afghanistan and Pakistan, the drone bombings. He says very nice things on the screen, but he actually does all these bombings in all these countries, killing wedding parties. And so, political correctness is also a nice way to present yourself to the audience that you intend, while continuing to do things which are completely on an antithetical level.
I wouldn't extend this.
You're giving an example and extending it to everyone who is politically correct.
Yeah, but I wouldn't extend this so
No,
easily.
I'm not extending it to everyone. I'm saying this is one of the ways political correctness can be used.
Sure, but I wouldn't. I would make a difference between political correctness when used by the layman and political correctness when used by the President of the United States, who has to know that he's engaged or his government is engaged or people under his command are engaged in
Yeah.
all sorts of
You're playing a
dirty,
strategy.
controversial
Yeah, so it's
things.
just
It's
You
it's just a
cannot be
difference of
intellectually absolutely.
Yeah, it's a quantitative difference, not a
Yeah.
qualitative
Yeah.
difference.
As a politician, I think you can never be intellectually honest completely.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, there are arguments that you can make to not in favor of deception, but of how to put it, selective.
Or phased out information giving. or-
Selective publishing of information.
No, that's
Or something like
that's the utilitarian view of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, you cannot be a Kantian in politics.
You cannot be
You really like Kant.
complete.
You have to be Sri Krishna. Yeah?
You cannot be 100% transparent. Yeah, it's impossible. It's counterproductive.
Sometimes you have to do wrong things to achieve the right ends.
I would have to.
And I'm saying that
In general,
I'm
agree
saying
with
that
that.
on record. Yeah.
Generally speaking, I would have to agree. It would come down to a case by case scenario, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So, reform and Islam and
Yeah.
the West, migration.
No, not
frictions.
migration. I'm really interested to know how do you what will be a utopian situation
Yeah.
on how things progress.
Utopian situation.
Okay,
would be,
utopia is a place. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the path to utopia.
Yeah.
How will that
Yeah,
work? Yeah.
that the path would be that there is free speech in Western world and online, and there is, because of this free speech, people are getting exposed to realities, mostly Muslims. When your Facebook friend who happens to be Muslim posts something that is completely against human rights, then you should have the guts to challenge him or her. Like I did. I challenged a friend of mine a few days ago when she posted something completely horrific, a statement of Prophet Muhammad.
Do you know? Can you say what? Or
If I have internet, yes. I could
Okay,
look
yeah.
it up. But I challenged, in fact, yeah, it's also in the laptop. I challenged her and I had a thorough discussion, completely civil, but I put my point through. And my utopian idea is that if everyone does that, or if enough people do that, and there is a free discussion, free exchange of ideas, then eventually better sense will prevail. Because we are, after all, rational to a very great degree. Yeah, not completely, I would say. We are also emotional. But from one generation to the other, better sense will eventually prevail. Other thing is that the other problem which I see is that now our world is getting into many potentially disastrous situations, like with the climate change, scarcity of water. So that might cause people to
Unite at a different front.
yeah, or rather it might cause them to stick to what they have.
it's basically the alien invasion scenario.
Yeah, it might make them dig their trenches, and that's a threat which I see. But with free speech and a complete free flowing of ideas, where people do not censor themselves, the biggest threat to free speech is the limits imposed on your mind. Group the mind. What did Orwell call it? The mind, the thought.
What are you like? You're talking about 1984?
Yeah.
The thought police?
Yeah, the thought police imposed what? The thought police imposed thought control or whatever. So basically, you prevent yourself from saying something. Yeah, within your
double speak. No,
double think.
Double speak.
Double speak. Yeah, double think.
Whatever.
What do you get the
read
point?
that again.
So
It's been a while, yeah.
That's according to me, that's the only hope, where people have the moral fortitude to say what they think, and the government has the good sense to allow people to do that. That's it. If that is provided, then I think the world will be definitely a much better place.
No.
Okay.
So you don't. So in your worldview, there is no need. It needs to be. It will be a gradual process, and there will be no real reformation movement or something. Like there will be no crisis moment.
No, I don't think there will be a revolution. And I'm completely
so it
against
be a revolution, and there will be an evolution.
Evolution, yeah. I'm fundamentally opposed to
top-down
revolution.
control of any sort.
Completely organic. That's also reflected in my doctoral thesis. I am completely bottoms up person. I believe in devolving powers. I believe in smaller communities. I believe in an approach which springs from the individual to the top.
But things can go very wrong sometimes.
In fact, things cannot go wrong. If things are top down, then there is a very good chance that things will go wrong, because when things are bottom up, things happen at a smaller level, things happen gradually, things happen experimentally, So there is a small community, it tries it out, it thinks, okay, this is good, this is bad, then it goes to the other community. When things are bottoms up, things are resilient. And bad ideas get weeded out when things are bottom up. When things are top down, the basic problem with top down approach is that you do not know what the system is. When a government puts in some law in work, the government does not know what exactly it is dealing with. Or rather, even the village doesn't know, but the village knows more than the government.
Can I extend it a bit and then we get back to the points?
Okay. I keep a point on hold there.
Yeah. Do you, in such a worldview, do you also, so when it's a bottoms-up approach, do you see globalization of some sort happening at some point, or there will be more alienated cultures, like insular, cultural?
No, globalization has already happened, and there will be connectivity.
And to what extent would you want it to happen? Like maybe economic globalization, you would like to have scientific and maybe exchange of ideas that will also tend to homogenize things, right? Are you in favor of that?
See, that's not a homogenizing that is imposed. Yeah, it is. The thing is, when I'm saying top down, bottom up, I'm speaking about control. I'm speaking about power. And ideas in itself are not agents of power. They are agents of empowerment. So it's completely not my concern if ideas are allowed to spread. In fact, I want them to spread. All I'm saying is that smaller units, or rather the individual, should have the power to, or rather the individual should be given all the resources to take a decision.
And how will these complexes, and you think these complex systems that will arise will still have discrete, completely diverse populations?
Are you familiar with the moral landscape concept of Sam Harris?
No, I think I've heard it, but no. Go ahead.
He kind of envisages a landscape of where the peaks of this landscape are peaks of well-being, of human flourishing. And there might be many ways to reach different levels of human flourishing and meet different peaks with different heights. And there are valleys in which you can have a society going into one of those basins of attractions where they incur in social practices that are just toxic for every member of that society and ultimately self-destructive. Yeah. So if you have that concept in your mind and you can kind of apply it to the way you see things evolving naturally, when you
then you are afraid that there will be devices, there will be many tops and many valleys.
It sounds as if the possibility of people going into a valley
or going high up,
it's not even there. That cannot happen.
Yeah,
that's what you're saying.
I think it becomes very less likely because.
But I think you can even
given freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and a free-flowing exchange of ideas across cultures.
Yeah, but you can look at examples, modern, not so modern, and even ancient, in which people, by their own means, have happened
self-destructed.
Have happened to come to very bad cultural arrangements that
because they were insular societies.
Not always. So I can think of different cases. I can think, for instance, when it was the 2000. When 2000 was around, the year 2000 was around the corner, I think. And there was this kind of cultish movement that suddenly and spontaneously arose in the middle of the United States, in which some charismatic leader convinced hundreds of individuals that let's go to this island and let's just commit massive suicide because once we reach the the year 2000, there's all sorts of catastrophes that are going to occur, and it's better if we just,
No, definitely.
let's kill ourselves. That's one. It's hard to argue that they were insular because they were just Americans, living in a situation in which there's a free flow of ideas. Now, I don't know, are you familiar with, probably you haven't heard, there's a podcast from Dan Carlin, who's like a amateur historian. No, not amateur historian. He's a fan of history. He's a fan of history.
I would say he's a historian.
He is the guy that turned podcasting into an art, basically.
Yeah, the 6-hour-long podcasts.
Yeah, the Prophets of
So
Doom.
which example did he give?
The Prophets of Doom. You remember that one? Of the Anabaptists in Münster in Germany.
The Protestant reformative movement that started.
That were essentially like a breakaway sect of Christianism that happened to land on a very bad, terrible interpretation of the Christian religion and particular notions of Christianism that drove them into basically trenching themselves in the city of Münster and kind of falling into all sorts of depravity and driving themselves towards an untenable situation.
Both examples pretty good. But
all I'm saying is that...
No, what I'm saying is the system that I said, bottoms up, I will not say that it is a perfect system. That's the caveat. It's not perfect. But given the other systems that can be implemented, it is the best opportunity or the best system. Even considering these two examples that you gave, how many of these guys were there in Münster? Or how many of them? 100 people,
More, but...
whatever. 100,000, let's say. But you see how small it is and what an outlier this event is. Consider Islam. 1.3 billion people or more. 1,400 years. It has been the biggest disaster this world has ever seen. The biggest humanitarian crisis. Why? It's top down.
Again.
Okay, so can I? Yeah. So this is how I see it. I do really. So I also think. I don't know how to start this argument, but you have to grant human psychology and human biology to interplay, like this sense of nationalism, tribalism, that is going to pack people up. If you don't have a higher order system, there will be lower scale systems which will be doing hardcore things. There will be different beliefs being segregated out. But with your argument, like if we let people do everything on their own, with free speech, free exchange of everything,
I'm not saying
I don't. You will give up on whatever notions of society that we have gathered over the periods of time. Like for instance, public. I don't know. Have you listened to the recent episode of Dan Carlin where he talks about pain and what ridiculous level of pain people were made to go through, and how the entire mass, the mainstream mass, really enjoyed that. Like with respect to that, for instance, we have morally improved a lot. We have progressed. And in the entirely the societies that we have lived in these horrific societies, whatever must have happened, in maybe a slightly top-down, but also a bottom-up exchange, maybe an exchange of cultural ideas, but also something imposing on top. There has been some sort of progress.
No, for sure. See, there are systems at various levels of panarchy. There is the individual, like I said in the beginning, individual, family, village, city, state, nation. All of these are existing levels of panarchy, and they have to have their own power. You cannot give the power to manage the defenses to a city in modern times. It has to be with the country. But I'm not speaking about that. What I said with the democratization or the bringing to the individual is the information. And
so you want a free dissemination of information between people without any restrictions. Without any restrictions.
I just want to say something. In what I said before, I'm actually a little bit again playing devil's advocate, because overall I agree that the best way to achieve harmony is if you have a culture or a society in which ideas are allowed to flow as freely as possible, and that you minimize the level of top-down control to reasonable limits. We might disagree on which those limits are, but we can get into that. But I do agree that it's preferable to have a small amount of limits,
less insular.
Yeah, I'm inclined. I'm leaning towards.
What's said nowadays is less government, more governance.
I move towards that side. I am inclined towards that side. So that's all the point I wanted to make is that it just sounded for a moment that I consider myself an optimist, but I was seeing you as a uber optimist in the sense of there was no
what
way
humans are capable of.
Yeah, there was no way in which if you have a system where there's free flow of ideas, there's just not going to happen that a group of people are going to land into a very bad system.
There's a very nice historical example of a different form of utopia.
Anyway, I got it. That was the point I wanted to get across, even though I agree for the most part. That's one thing. And the other thing is, you then said, when you had to think about an example of how top-bottom means of control, kind of a totalitarian approach to control, can go very wrong, you said Islam. And I'm a little bit curious about what exactly you mean, because I cannot see that as a system of that has been driven to its current status because of top-down control, in the sense of Islam. It happened, for instance, after the Arab Spring, after Mubarak was brought down in Egypt, right? There was the first chance for the Egyptians in a very long time to decide who was going to rule them.
And they chose democracy.
And they happened to choose
the Muslim Brotherhood.
The Muslim Brotherhood. So it's hard to say.
I get that. So
it seems to be the opposite, right? It seems to be that the system it seems to be enforced from the bottom.
That's what I'm telling you.
Good.
This is what I mean. It's a good example, but I'll tell you where the contradiction is. Yeah. Top bottom in this case, in case of Islam, what I mean by that is, top is the God who has given Muhammad the book.
Okay.
And this book can be interpreted by the Maulavis nowadays, or since historical times it was the Maulavis. So there's the God, his book, his Maulavis, and then what they say has to be implemented by everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
Now these people, of course, they chose democracy, which was in accordance with the top book.
Yeah, okay, but that's also an important distinction to make, because in this particular, if you're going to categorize systems, religious systems, where the authority comes from the top, definitely,
and that is
in this top-bottom kind of systematization, certainly,
and that is what I'm
but it's not the ultimate receptacle of authority. Is just not a human being, right? It's something really top. I mean,
the top.
Beyond the top.
So this top-down is typical again of Abrahamic religions, where you have a central authority, the book, the religion of the book. That is the top authority, which is interpreted by the minions, which is the Maulavis or the priests, and then you have the proletariat who have to receive the wisdom. And
sure.
This is the top-bottom approach, which is the most dangerous because it is a religious approach of mind.
Agreed.
As opposed to Eastern approaches like Hinduism, Buddhism. In Hinduism, every person finds his own God. Yeah. And there is no central authority which tells you what is true and what is not. Rather...
I get that. I
we can have that on a different podcast.
I agree. I agree to the extent. To the extent in which this kind of top-bottom approach or top-bottom system of control, it gets only exacerbated when the authority, the ultimate authority, resides on something that is divine and therefore perfect, because then really that doesn't leave you any tools to counteract.
You cannot have any metaphysical arguments anything to counteract what has already been laid
No,
down.
I get it. It's just that we were talking first about human systems.
Okay,
Yeah.
can I
Mhm.
move a bit further with something?
Of course.
Yeah.
Suppose there is this kind of an organic way of dissemination, and there is communication which leads to a more harmonious society. Do you see a more homogeneous single culture, or you see a lot of diverse cultures coexisting? And if you see a more homogeneous culture, will you have a problem with that?
Well, again, now the culture is the word here.
Yes.
Yeah. Homogeneous culture. What part of that culture do you think will be homogeneous? The clothing won't be homogeneous. The language probably won't be homogeneous.
It's getting more and more
Yeah.
homogeneous already.
Yeah, it is, but it might not. I mean, languages have...
If there is a sense of communication between everyone, it could very well be
Yeah, it
that
could be.
we
It could be.
just speak very strongly in one language.
Yeah, it could be, and if that happens
And
gradually...
it could be that a global trend of wearing a jeans, which exists everywhere, and more and more
I think
people wear
what
it.
you're trying to say that whatever markers are left that distinguish one culture from another would be mostly regarded as superfluous, right?
Yes.
That there would be superficial things just
And
as
this
that,
will,
like
this
clothing,
notion
food.
of homogenization is going to hurt a lot of people. Like in India, we talk about unity in diversity
the
and
thing
all
is,
at that
if it
point.
happens gradually, then it won't hurt. And it will
And
happen
that has
gradually.
happened. That has happened. Like
And
we used to live in
that's-
tribes,
yeah.
absolutely insular tribes.
And
Over
that's what I'm saying.
that time, we have communicated.
With this setting, bottoms up setting, or the setting of free exchange of thoughts, ideas, everything that is intellectual and all, the change will be gradual, and it will be something that will be able to be digested, by a vast amount of people, the majority.
But you'll be comfortable with having no diversity at some point in the future.
It doesn't matter if I'm comfortable or not.
No, I'm just asking.
I'm just worried about the system that exists.
I'm talking about your subjective thoughts.
Yeah, I don't have any subjective thought on that.
Okay.
You wouldn't care less one way or the other.
Yeah, because if it happens, it happens. It's not my culture that's going on.
Yeah, I think it was just mostly trying to get at would you like it? Do you like the idea? How does that make you feel, emotionally speaking?
Because we do give a lot of importance. This is also an issue at the current moment, like diversity.
Yeah.
Like retaining your own personality,
Firstly,
your identity.
I am a huge fan of diversity. I think human diversity is amongst the greatest things that we have on this planet. And actually, I would really like if there is diversity. At least if all the languages survive.
Yeah.
Because there is so much...
There is
so much human thought that is captured that it breaks my heart to imagine that there will be a time when Gabriel Garcia Marquez won't be appreciated in his original language, or Tagore won't be appreciated, or Pula Deshpande's humor won't be funny anymore.
Yeah, but it's diversity again at I wouldn't say rather superficial level, but once we have agreed as a species that there are some values we should just better share all together, right?
Yeah.
Some core values, certain code of morality.
I wouldn't say we have to. I wouldn't say that we should agree. I mean, because when we say we have to agree, we are imposing something. Yeah.
No, from either. I'm not saying that somebody is going to force you into agreement.
So with respect
but
to...
when we mutually settle down eventually to something, I think that would be great.
So one thing is for sure, it will always be like a bell curve of opinions.
Yeah. There will be
people,
scatters.
So you have the exact distribution. But right now, with absolutely insular cultures, opinions with respect to something, you don't even fit in that same curve.
Yeah.
You are completely different curves. So you are trying
That's
to
why
fit in and bringing it into a single curve.
Removed. Yeah. Insularity has to be removed so that there is...
This is where I completely agree.
But I think there's no way back, right?
There
under which kind of circumstances
we are going
you can remain insular in nowadays? It's really it has to be your choice. You know?
No, but there is a wave of conservatism.
The biggest thing that is causing insulation is the bringing up of the child. So if you bring up the child believing certain ideas to be gospel truth, then you are pre-programming the child to cognitively reject certain information that he will get in as an adult. And this is the problem with many Islamists. They seem to be extremely well-read, well-educated people. Like I've met a few in Dresden itself. But they will have the most ridiculously backward ideas when it comes to freedom of women or the role of women in society.
Because that's out of question.
Yeah, because that has been established. That's a given for them. Their upbringing is that.
It's not only that, it's that people that are devout to that extent sincerely believe that, for instance, the Quran and the Hadith have revealed the right way, and that actually their religion provides women with more rights or more integrity or more value than even a more secular society or another religion. It's just they are convinced of that fact.
And for such a thing, the best antidote is to expose them to the facts.
Expose them to which facts again?
The facts of if it is so, what they think, if that is so. They might believe something, but it's not true. If that's not true, then just show them the sources.
Many times.
So this is your way of coming to the process of getting to this some form of utopian idea you have.
Not utopian,
so
but
what will be the process? What will be the process then? Let's talk about the process now. Right? From where we are, how do we go there?
As I already said, just the government should not impose thought control on its people. And the people should have the guts to confront bad ideas.
Do you see that happening?
I'm doing it.
Yes. And you see that it's like a trickle moment.
It is. It can.
And there will be enough trickles all around, and eventually something could work out.
I cannot say if there will be enough trickles all around, but I can only try.
And human biases with respect to the tribal feeling that we have, which you refer to as nationalism, that won't impede this move.
It will definitely impede, and that's where the role of friends come in. Because people are receptive when someone whom they like, trust, comes at them with a foreign idea. If I confront someone who has nothing to do with me, an idea, then he will not be receptive to it. And I have to say, I do confront many people whom I have no connection with. And I realize that it can be sometimes counterproductive, but it's
more often than not.
Yeah, I probably always counterproductive, but I'm not perfect.
But I would say, with respect to something like this, I think that is how I would like to contribute, and this is part of the reason why we have such a podcast.
More power to you.
That's part of it.
As in, at least let out a communication.
It started, that's part of the reason, but I would, at least from my side, I wouldn't even say that was the main reason. I think this is what we like to do. We like to sit down, we like to talk, we like to contribute our little bit to this free flow of thoughts, ideas, and just to have a ground that is open for discussions, and that's what we're trying to do.
And I'm just fortunate that I come from a culture which has been doing this for 5,000 years or so. So
I think there are many ways to reach to that point.
He is opening another one.
That were invented probably, much more recently. But good.
Okay then.
I think
for once we are getting into a natural
closure. We can tie it nicely. No? It was nice to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
I think this was a series of episodes with you, and for sure in the future, whenever we think it's pertinent, we will have you again. Particularly, I think Hinduism, because
we can raise that topic
behind cameras there had been
quite a few
heated discussions about this. So it would be nice to have you back. Good. Now say goodbye to the audience.
Goodbye, audience.
Thank you, audience. Thank you for listening.
See you next time.
Okay, then.
If you like what we do, Please help us continue doing it simply by subscribing to our YouTube channel, following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, visiting our website tillthebottom.com, or spreading the voice. All the links are provided in the description. Thank you for listening, and until the next time.